From supply chain disruptions to bold new innovations, the transportation and logistics world is heating up. Join top industry minds as they tackle M&A and reveal what's steering the future.
Welcome to In the Hot Seat with the Tenney Group. I'm Spencer Tenney. It's good to be with you. We're here at IANA, a little heat on the street. And with me, back by popular demand, Eric Johnson. Eric, introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll jump right in.
Sure. Yeah, it's Eric Johnson. I'm a senior technology editor with the Journal of Commerce. We're a publication that focuses on international domestic logistics and global trade. I'm also director at S&P Global, which is the parent company of the Journal of Commerce.
All right, so we're going to hit a couple issues here, but most recently, here about a month ago, we talked about tariffs, some of the upstream effects, some of the downstream effects, some of which doesn't make headlines, people don't understand. Yep. Unpack, there's some really interesting things. Tell us a little bit about your article and what we need to know.
Yeah, so I think everyone is pretty well aware these days of kind of the impact that tariff uncertainty is having on especially importers. There's been a ton of ink spilled around whether consumers are bearing the brunt of that, whether importers themselves are absorbing those costs and not passing it on to consumers or their customers, or whether some of that is being sort of absorbed upstream by importers, suppliers at origin. One thing that's probably a little underexposed is the impact of something called a bond that importers have to have an outlay for. Basically, when you are expecting to pay a certain amount of tariffs to CBP, you have to have a financial backstop for that. So you work with a bank to make sure that you have enough money to pay your forecast tariffs. Now, pre-February 2025, most companies had fairly low tariffs. I think the average tariff level was 2-3%. It's a lot higher now. That translates into higher outlay of costs, which we all know. We're seeing the numbers in terms of tariff revenue coming through. You have to have a bond that says you can afford to pay all those tariffs that importers are paying. So a little bit of an under kind of appreciated aspect of the tariff scenario right now, and it's something that's hitting especially small to medium sized importers who don't necessarily have the financial, leverage with banks and other, lending facilities. But yeah, pretty much across the board. Large importers are facing it because they have huge tariff bills.
So give us an example of that from a cash flow standpoint. Like, what were they experiencing? What is this new obligation? What does it actually mean to the folks involved?
Well, I mean, I think new obligation is probably, rather than new obligation, it's just an increased obligation, right? So below a certain percentage or below a certain dollar threshold, and it's escaping me. I wrote this story too long ago. It's somewhere in the $50,000 range. You don't need to maintain a bond at all. After you get to a certain amount where you're projecting you're going to owe this much in tariffs, you have to maintain a bond. And that bond you have to forecast what that bond is. And if you overshoot it, too bad, you've paid a bond that's in excess of what you needed. If you undershoot it, it's difficult to go back and add, and you have to add it in certain increments. That is cumbersome administratively, but also from a cash flow perspective.
Yeah, and as if we had any need for more cash flow or more complications, but here we are. Let me transition, as we were walking in here, we were talking about some of the interesting developments around AI technology, cap raising. What's your take? What's happening? It seems like we're getting an announcement like weekly, either a cap raise or some type of tech announcement. I mean, this is your area of specialization.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. This is the fourth week in a row I've been on the road, and basically every single speaking engagement now is somewhat tied to AI. People want to understand what's going on, either at a really high level or at a granular level, depending on who the audience is, but everyone is super interested in understanding what's going on and how it's impacting logistics, both domestic, international. The interesting thing, as you mentioned, is there's lots of venture capital now flowing into this space, not just in logistics, across the board, right? Everybody is trying to figure out how AI is going to sort of disrupt workflows. And by the way, that goes all the way to the generating the code that goes into software, so it's at a very fundamental level. It's not just at a consumer product or a user perspective. So, my natural inclination is when I see a huge amount of of money flooding in, you're sort of like the hype meter starts going off. Is it too much too soon? Are there too many companies trying to address the same problem? We've certainly seen that over the last 15 years. Venture capital tends to fixate on a trend, and then everybody jumps into it. I think the difference maybe with this one is we are seeing companies like freight brokers, freight forwarders, they are not having to be convinced about this. They are actually actively experimenting with a lot of different companies. My question is, what's the ceiling for some of those use cases, and how many companies can be supported in doing this? I think the other element to think about is there's a lot of companies that are sort of AI specific, but not process specific. They're trying to say, we can build something that can address any sort of process.
Right.
And then there's other companies that are providing software around a certain process, and they're adding an agent or an AI layer to what they already do.
Right.
To me, that's going to be an interesting kind of fork in the road. Like, what approach is more successful? Are the companies that are like purely agentic and say we can do almost anything that the industry wants us to do? Mm-hmm. Are those going to be more successful, or the ones where the industry knows like this software does this, and now they're sort of juicing it up with kind of an agentic layer?
Yeah. What preferences are you seeing from venture capital as it relates to that fork in the road? Do you see any correlation anywhere? Or?
Well, I think most of the startups are on the more kind of what I'll call general purpose side. Mm. Not general purpose meaning they do everything across every type of industry, but they're a little less specific around what transportation and logistics is doing, and more like there are inefficiencies everywhere we look. I think that's a more natural entry point for a venture capital firm, whereas an existing software vendor that's layering in some sort of AI already has probably raised a lot of money. They're way past the point. They're either in a growth capital stage or they're ready to exit in some way, and so that's not the right place for most venture firms to be involved in. So it's definitely more on kind of like rethinking how business is done rather than making this process a little bit better through an existing piece of software.
Understood. So we also mentioned there's some curious transactions taking place in the supply chain tech. Some that make sense, some that we're still kind of wait and see. It's not an obvious, or maybe unexpected. Maybe that might be the right terminology. So what do you think's happening? Because there's some ecosystems that are developing through some of these acquisitions that present some interesting possibilities, but strategically could go a variety of different ways. Can you just comment on that?
So, I think the clearest one right now is kind of what's going on in the, for lack of a better word, load board world. Load board seems like kind of an antiquated phrase these days, but I think most people still call them load boards,
you can dress it up however you want.
You can dress it up. Is it a marketplace? Is it a platform, right? And I think that's part of what's going on here. So you have DAT that's made 3 acquisitions in the last 12 months. You had Triumph make a couple acquisitions earlier this year. You've had Truckstop make some interesting moves in terms of trying to extend their platform. And the 3 of them combined, if you look at them, trying to address, and I'm sort of using the words that DAT's leadership has talked about this around, is transactions, so shipment transactions, the financial piece that underpins that, trust in the network, so eliminating sort of identity stuff, eliminating or going some way toward eliminating theft and fraud. Those things are all sort of coalescing around this idea of, instead of using something for each one of those things, can they all be undertaken in a single place? So they're all 3 of those companies are aiming to be the place where that happens. And they've come from various different starting points, right? Triumph, obviously, from the financial side, DAT from the, and even Truckstop from the, the shipment transaction side, adding financial pieces to that. And it's just really, really, really interesting to watch, observe it from the outside. It's very early. We've literally, these transactions have all happened within the last 9 months. So to say whose approach is right, who has the scale to actually pull this off, one is the largest, one has a really kind of strong financial position, and another, others have a little bit stronger kind of identity management positions in terms of the carrier. So, but it's really fascinating. I think we've been hearing for 10 years about like the platform economy, you know, and,
Right.
and we all live in Amazon and we all live in our personal lives and these other things. Could we see that in the truckload space where there's like literally a platform that kind of everybody starts to live in?
We'll see. Last question, what blind spots do you see for investors in tech right now? What are they not seeing that presents some potential danger?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think most investors now are so much more, informed about the way this market works, the cycles that it goes through, the long sales cycles that, most buyers take a long time to make decisions. They don't transact things overnight. So I think overall investors are a lot more aware of that. But there's still sort of an inclination to kind of jump in the latest trend, the AI thing being a perfect example. I think one thing that investors, that's still, and we may have talked about this the last time we spoke, is we still are waiting for an exit, like a major, like blow the doors down, multi-billion-dollar exit from a venture-backed company, right? And so, until that happens, it remains to be seen whether this is the right industry and how fragmented it is and how easy it is to spin something up to address a small problem, whether this is the right market for that type of capital, right? And the flip side of that is there's a whole bunch of companies that are doing really cool things that maybe never would have gotten off the ground without venture, right? And so, it's not for me to say that venture shouldn't be investing in this, but I think the question remains whether it's really the right industry for that type of capital.
And we're going to leave it right there. Eric, I appreciate your insights so much. That's going to do it for us in the hot seat. We will see you next time.